This may not seem like an overarching topic that we discuss a lot. It might not be something that is present within all styles of music. I think that it is, but some folks may not feel this way. The idea that we may expect a little bit too much from our favorite musicians, especially those who have been around for quite some time. It's interesting that bands that tend to make it to the 20 to 30 year mark of their careers still have a loyal fan base that really want to have new music. They want this to continue for as long as possible. And I feel that this is not because the fans take these bands for granted. I think it's actually the opposite, that they know that they know how time works. They know that time is short and it's important to them to get as much material from these bands as humanly possible. They want to hear what these bands have to say. They want to hear this music. They don't want the end to be here yet. So they're delaying the inevitable, as long as they possibly can. But are we expecting a little bit too much from our musicians to the point where it's become a little bit more vogue for bands to stick around way longer than they need to? Are some of our favorite bands well past their primes? Is this something that we're asking for all of this music, and we're asking also for quality that perhaps just isn't there anymore? The magic, is it still present, or has it disappeared long ago? Or is it something that we remember differently only because of past successes? And I'll give you a couple of great examples to kind of go along with that. For those who really enjoy progressive music, there is a wealth of groups, the prog rock groups, the forefathers from the 1970s, whose 80s material is not necessarily as well received. And even with newer releases that they've done in the 2010s and the aughts, they have not been as well received. Yes is an example that comes to mind almost instantaneously. They had a great 70s run. They had their big album in the first part of the 1980s. They were able to release, pieces here and there of further albums, but for the most part, the things that they have produced over the past 20 years have been largely, serviceable, but don't have that same magic that you might hear from their earlier albums. And you could even say the same thing for other genres of music. This is not something that is just restrictive to metal or rock. Take a look at an artist such as Prince, who released a ton of albums and a ton of material under multiple names throughout his career. He has his golden hits, the ones that everybody is going to go right for. They're not going to necessarily dig right into the deeper cuts of Prince whenever they're first getting on board, which is natural, that is what you expect. And they're not going to necessarily maybe even go to these deep cuts ever within their fandom. They may only like those hits, and the rest of the stuff is seen as just kind of meh. But the material that he's released within the past 10 to 15 years prior to his death has been seen as a bit mixed. There's not a universal acclaim as there was for albums of the past. And this is just natural. This is just natural. So are there three things that we're asking way too much of our artists for? Are we asking way too much whenever it comes to quality of music? Are we asking way too much whenever it comes to quantity of music? Do we have unrealistic expectations? I'd like to address each one of these things because I feel that it is quite important. With a band such as Iron Maiden, for example, who released the Book of Souls back in 2015 and was somehow able to shock the world with one of their most solid albums within their discography, I feel that this is a rare feat that older bands don't tend to have the ability to do. It's something that has to do with age and something that has to do with these expectations that we as fans sometimes give to these groups. They feel that they have to really magnify what they do, try to reinvent their own wheel a little bit, and whenever they do that, the fans sometimes have a very mixed response. It's not exactly what they're looking for. Fans can be sometimes extremely fickle, reviewers as well. If you notice throughout the reviews that I have done in the past decade, there were times where I said, hey, if a band was able to give me an album that is just like this, they're going to continue to be on a hot streak. But then eventually, after a couple of albums, I'm saying, hey, they need to do a little something different. This is nice, I enjoy this, but in order for them to really feel like they're on top of the world again, they need to do something that shows their expansive library, that shows their ability, that shows that they're not just resting on their laurels, that they're advancing, evolving, becoming more than just a parody of themselves. That's the fear that I have that some bands become, especially as they age. They age so much and continue to deliver material that it just becomes self-parody. They're simply trying to recapture some of the same magic of the same sounds that gained them a large fandom or a large fan base, and as a result, the material may have similar tone, but doesn't boast similar quality. And the fans want quality. They want this stuff to sound and give them the same feelings that the classic albums that they love do. You know, perhaps their favorite album isn't the album that the band just produced or just released a couple of years ago. Perhaps that Iron Maiden fan that was surprised by the Book of Souls was not having The Final Frontier as their favorite album, or A Matter of Life and Death, or Dance of Death. Perhaps their favorite album was, Number of the Beast, or Somewhere in Time. Perhaps that band listens to this and sees it as a little bit too much, that the band has sort of strayed away from what it was that they remember them best as, and as a result cannot connect with this music nearly as much. Now, as a band, it doesn't really matter. If you want to produce material, that's absolutely your prerogative. And I know that most of these musicians are in a golden position where if they can produce music and be a musician as long as they possibly can, they're absolutely going to want to do that. There's nothing that showcases deterioration similar to a pro athlete or a professional wrestler. There's not judgment that is decayed whenever it comes to political or business minds. You could technically be a musician until you die, and a lot prefer to do that. But as fans, we sometimes get disappointed whenever some of those older classic bands or even some young bands decide to hang it up, and we sometimes criticize some of those reasons. But there are some groups out there where our desire and our cries for quantity should perhaps be muted a little bit more. A band that comes to mind for that is the band Porcupine Tree. Porcupine Tree is one of my favorite artists of all time. If they decided to reunite, that would be pretty awesome. But if I'm being also honest, I believe that if they did that, it would hopefully just be for a tour. I actually don't want to hear any new Porcupine Tree material. I'm satisfied with what they're doing with their careers right now. I'm satisfied with Steven Wilson's, solo career, and I'm satisfied with the other members going their separate ways and doing their own separate things. I think that Porcupine Tree, with the incident, really offered a great final bow, and as a result, their creativity had morphed into something completely different, something that was handled, or needed to be handled, on a more individual basis. There were different things that they wanted to explore. And as a result, whenever you take a look back on Porcupine Tree's career to begin with, they went on a sonic pioneer joyride throughout the whole entire extent of it, sampling things that were almost Pink Floydian, which the band hates, but not the music, but the comparison, but it is kind of true. They did some samplings with krautrock, with prog metal, with albums such as Deadwing and In Absentia. This band has done everything that they probably should and could. And I would rather have that be my memory of this group as opposed to demanding they come back and do another record and potentially deliver something that doesn't feel like it has that same tone or doesn't feel like it should or would size up within their discography. It's something where I kind of treasure that discography so much, I don't really find very many flaws in it whatsoever, that as a result, I kind of want that, stability to be maintained. I want that to be what exists as the PT discography. Now I know, I'm just a silly, stupid fan. They can do whatever they want. Porcupine Tree could decide to come back tomorrow, and that would be fine. But it's not something that should be aided by fan pressure in order to do that. It should be something that the band decides to do on their own. It shouldn't be something that we clamor for. We can say that we wish that Black Sabbath was still making music, but Black Sabbath has been around since 1968. They've been in this game for more than 50 years. They're old. They want to relax. There are problems that they have going on. I know that Ozzy's continuing on, and I know Iommi has had his problems, but this is something where, let it die. It's fine. Everything's good. 13 was an adequate farewell, and I know there was maybe supposed to be more material, but, whatever. Would the quality be there? Are we really all of that obsessed with quantity and having more and more and more music from these bands where maybe the quality isn't there? We want both. And it's something where it just might not be something that's delivered. Sometimes you just have to be happy with what you've got. And sometimes you have to just understand that the best thing to do is just to say goodbye, or remember them for the memories that they were able to dispense. Other bands that feel like they are right within this scenario are groups such as Megadeth or even Metallica. I don't think Metallica would have to release another album. They might decide to do S&M too, which they are going to do. You know, that's another live album. That's another live experience. They could do live albums or special one-off ideas like that for the remainder of their career and be absolutely fine. The live experience and spectacle of seeing this group perform their classics and performing their hits is something that's extremely important. There are so many bands out there that make a living off of doing just this. You know, even groups from as recently as the 1980s. I can't tell you the last Poison album that I know came out. It's probably something that was within the past 10 years, and I just flat out missed it. But I know that I probably wouldn't want to listen to that album. I'd rather listen to the classics. Not because I think that Poison's incapable of writing good music in 2019, but I understand that there's a very different time frame that we live in, and age definitely does things to you. I know this just as a reviewer. You know, I'm 35 years old right now. Little window into the world. Of course I was a lot more angry whenever I was 24. Of course I had a lot more energy. Of course I wanted to take on the world whenever I was 24. But whenever I was 35, or when I this is if you're watching this in the future, the feelings have changed a little bit. It's no longer just about being angry. The anger is organic, as opposed to the anger being something that's just toward everything. It's something where I've changed as a person. Everyone's changed as a person. And as a result, the way people write music or the things that they talk about within their lyricism is all going to change as well. We need to understand that sometimes we do ask a little bit too much from these musicians that we love. And I understand that they're not necessarily feeling the heat of the pressure necessarily. This isn't something where they're looking at all of these different tweets or emails or comments on YouTube videos and thinking to themselves, crap, we need to put out a brand new album because Bill in Biloxi really wants us to do one more. You know, they're not doing that. These are all decisions that are based upon their own behalf. Sure, they say that they do it for the fans, but that's really what every album is. Every album is an album that they made for either the fans or themselves, and in most cases it ends up being a combination of both. It's made for the fans because the fans want to listen to it, and it's made for themselves because it's hopefully written with music that they actually want to write, as opposed to trying to satisfy others. So really, whenever it comes to all of these different groups, should we be okay with them walking away, or simply becoming a touring band that just sort of touts out their classic hits, their greatest hits? Heavy metal is fine. There are tons of heavy metal bands out there for you to explore. And I understand that some of you only like a couple of different groups. And maybe they're getting a little bit aged. Maybe their material is starting to fall off a little bit. It doesn't give you those same feelings as it did maybe 10 years ago. And you might be questioning to yourself, did I change or did they change? Well, it's a little bit of both. You still want to hear new material from them. You still want to hear what they would have to offer. But at the same time, perhaps your expectations are a bit too high. Perhaps my expectations as a reviewer sometimes are a little bit too high. Opeth has a brand new album that's about to come out, which, if you're watching this in the future, just came out. Time is fun. I have expectations, but I don't have unrealistic ones. I know that this is a band that's taken a very different direction. I accept that. I actually kind of like it. I like it a lot. Are any of these albums necessarily standing alongside the shoulders of the giants of the Blackwater Parks and Still Lifes of the world? No. But that's my personal opinion. And those are albums that really, to me, had a great impact on my life. That's a little bit more of a subjective view on a question that is meant, or at least attempted to be, objective. So, maybe next time that we talk about a band that has an upcoming album, you know, a group that maybe has been around for 20 or 30 years, maybe we should subvert a little bit of our expectation. Maybe we should just enjoy the tunes that we get, because we don't know how many more albums there will be. And if we haven't heard from one of our favorite groups for a really long time, you know, Necrophagus for example, maybe we should just learn to be happy with the albums that we've got. Maybe we should just learn to accept that what we have is what we have, and love it for that. Should we still question, why isn't there more? Go to town. But we shouldn't allow that to cloud our judgment toward that which we do have. Let's give them some respect. Let's give them some love. And one final thing, if you made it to the end of this video, thank you very much. But go out, either today, tomorrow, or the next day, pick yourself up a brand new album. Whether it's something that you know, something that you don't, from a band that you love, or a band that you've never heard of. Support it. And if you don't have a store around you, order a couple online. Add to that collection. Physical is very important. It's something that those old groups, they used to support themselves on. That used to be the thing. I want to know what you guys think about this though. Do you think there's way too much of an expectation placed on bands that have been around for a long time to satisfy the fans' needs for quality and quantity? Do you think this is something that is legitimate, or do you think they don't care? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video. I'm CoverKillerNation, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.